Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in EGLE's Environmental Support Division. And I welcome you to tonight's Oscoda Area and former Wurtsmith Air Force Base PFAS update meeting. We've got about 21 people signed on right now, and I'm sure we'll have a few more people join us as we get things started. I'm just going to be sticking around kind of in the background today, helping out the team. I will go over a few logistical details for you all right now. So next slide, please. All right, I think Beth's running the slides. Oh, there you go. All right, thanks, Beth. All right, so housekeeping, basically, for right now, all the lines are muted. Just like with all our public meetings, we are recording this session, and when we're done, we put it up on the YouTube channel. I believe it's up on the MPART page as well, so you'll be seeing up there in a couple days. Next slide. In terms of how to ask questions, this is just like we do in the other meetings. We're using the Zoom platform, so if you have a question tonight, you can type your question into the Q&A box that you have on your Zoom toolbar. That'll come into us as a question. If you'd like to verbalize your question, you can click the raise hand icon, and that'll let us know that you would like to ask a question. And if you do that, we will call your name and we'll unmute your microphone so you can ask your question. It doesn't look like we have anybody on the phone tonight, phone only, but if we did, somebody's on the phone, they just hit #2, and that raises your hand on the phone. I think that's all the comments I have. So I'm going to turn it over to Sue Manente. Sue, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Sue Manente with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. I'd like to thank you for attending tonight. This is our next Wurtsmith Oscoda PFAS investigation quarterly meeting. And next slide, please, Beth. All right, so here's the agenda for tonight, where we have presentations from EGLE, 2 presentations from EGLE and 1 from MDHHS. We will go through comments, questions, and answers, and then we'll conclude the meeting. First, I'd like to ask if there are any local officials on who would like to introduce themselves this evening. If so, please feel free to unmute yourself and make that introduction.
Actually, you have to raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
Okay, not seeing any hands. Are you, Jim? Oh, I do.
Got a couple hands up.
We've got a couple.
Go ahead, William.
Yeah, Bill, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Sue. This is Bill Palmer. I'm Oscoda Township trustee.
Okay, and Jake?
Yep, Jake Babbitt, Congressman Kilty's office.
Great. Thanks for introducing yourselves. All right, next slide, Beth. And I believe we're heading into Beth's presentation now. So go ahead, Beth.
Okay, sorry, I'm a little slow with running the slides too. So I'm Beth Place, project manager for the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base for EGLE. The former Wurtsmith Air Force Base was established in 1923 and closed under the base realignment and closure decision of 1991 and officially closed at the end of June of 1993. Most of the acreage has been transferred for reuse, and Air Force is the lead of the environmental response actions under CERCLA. And the state is the regulatory agency and the support agency. So this is a map of the historical Wurtsmith Air Force Base. And here you can see that under the installation and restoration program, prior to PFAS being an issue at the site, at least sampled. The IRP sites were established primarily due to release of fuels like jet fuels, solvents, TCE, PCE, and those releases were to groundwater and soil or due to waste handling practices associated with landfills. And on the slide, you can also see the orangish yellow triangles. those are treatment systems. And so to the north, you have what we call the EWTS for landfill 3031. It's a engineered wetland treatment system. And that's primarily to treat VOCs and metals. Then as you go farther here, you also see these other treatment systems, and you have the benzene and aero treatment systems. Now that discharge, those were established to treat VOCs, but now that discharge is also treated for PFAS at the central treatment system. And then you also have the Mission Street treatment system, and which again was established to treat VOCs. So land use controls are in place across the base, and Air Force is currently preparing their 4th 5-year review. Now we go to the PFAS response. And so EGLE discovered PFAS at the site, our former site manager, Bob Delaney, in about 2010. And since that time, groundwater has been sampled, surface water has been sampled, fish, wildlife, residential wells, and several research projects have been going on at Wurtsmith. And all that, several information on those studies is available at michigan.gov/Wurtsmith on the MPAR website. The current PFAS, the past Air Force PFAS response has included the preliminary assessment and site inspection phases under CERCLA. Now we're currently in the remedial investigation phase. But in addition to that, Air Force has also completed a focused feasibility study at FTO2, which resulted in the FTO2 pump and treat system. And they've also completed removal actions, including treating the discharge for the aero and benzene pump and treat systems at the central treatment system, as well as treating the discharge of Mission Street pump and treat system for PFAS as well. And those are covered under substantive requirements documents through our Water Resources Division. Now we're currently in the remedial investigation phase of CERCLA. So the preliminary assessment and the site inspection have already been completed. And now it's the remedial investigation to determine the nature and extent of PFAS from the former base. The Air Force that's currently underway. Air Force is also completing 2 interim remedial actions at the same time. And that is the Vanetten Lake at Ratliff Park interim remedial action and FTO2 at Clark's Marsh interim remedial action. Air Force also completed a time critical removal action to remove soil at FTO2. And that action has already been completed, and the documents for several of these items and all Wurtsmith documents are available at the Air Force Administrative Record site, and the address is there, the web address. All right. For our next slide, to talk a little bit more about the remedial investigation and where we're kind of at with that right now. Air Force has completed a portion of the field work in the last field season. So they started in summer and went all the way up to almost Christmas, doing soil sampling, sampling of existing monitoring wells, and then some vertical aquifer sampling. And that's where you sample the aquifer or groundwater at selected intervals below the ground surface. So you have a good understanding at what level below the ground that you have samples for about every 10 feet below the ground. So you can really see where the PFAS contaminated water is beneath the ground surface. And so Air Force did a stepwise approach to get, and EGLE agreed to this, to get into the field and get some of the work completed. This field work will be continuing and starting back up in April, according to Air Force, weather permitting. And they'll continue on with that vertical aquifer sampling, sediment sampling, and surface water sampling. And so right now, the work plan was Air Force just finalized the work plan on February 22nd to 23rd. Not all of EGLE comments were resolved in that final work plan. And so currently, since that was just last week that was finalized, we're still discussing our path forward. It's currently under discussion, and we'll have more information on that soon. Air Force and EGLE will also be meeting for a systematic project planning meeting early in April to discuss the progress from the last field season while Air Force is going into the next field season. The other response action that's for PFAS that's currently going on is the interim remedial action at Vanetten Lake at Ken Ratliff Memorial Park. And so you can see where this location is. It's right along the western shore of Vanetten Lake. Air Force is installing extraction wells to install a hydrogeologic barrier to prevent PFAS contaminated water from entering Vanetten Lake in this area. Now that is we're still finalizing the documents on that. I know on Friday, Air Force sent back the ARARs for this project. And so those are really the state standards that would apply to the project here. And that's back with us right now, and we'll be turning that around very quickly this week to incorporate the changes, discuss the changes, and then get that back to Air Force. But there was nothing significant in there, so we're fairly positive that'll be back to them within a week. And then here you see that progress is still being made. That's the central treatment system building there up to the top right of this photo. And these are Air Force photos. But you can kind of see just at the bottom that there's a truck carrying one of the tanks for the expansion of the treatment system. So since we're in agreement that we're supportive of this treatment system, work is still ongoing to get the system up and running. And last I heard that it probably still will be in spring that the system is up and running from Air Force. The other response action that's going on that Air Force is leading is the FTO2 Interim Remedial Action. And so significant work has been done on this already. The documents are in place. The remedial action work plan has been reviewed. The record of decision is in place. ARARs have been agreed to, and really it's just construction of the building that's going on right now. And I know that some of the work to install the extraction wells has also been completed to determine where the screen lengths were going, and some of that was done the week of the RAB. Other updates from EGLE, and I apologize, the slide got a little messed up here, but these I've updated on the past. So in February 19th of 2021, EGLE requested that Air Force sample the expanded wetland treatment system at LF 3031 for PFAS in the effluent. That had been completed during the expanded site inspection phase, and the results were slightly above GSI criteria for PFOS. Air Force did sample this again during the beginning last summer when they started the remedial investigation. They sampled the effluent of the expanded wetland treatment system at LF 3031 again. And they sampled some of the wells in that area too. The results of the effluent were similar, slightly above our GSI criteria for PFOS. And our GSI criteria is 12 parts per trillion. The results were, I believe, around 13 and 14 parts per trillion. We asked Air Force to complete that sampling of the effluent on a monthly basis, along with the other sampling that they do at the expanded wetland treatment system. And so far, we have not received a response to that letter. Then in March, we asked of 2021, we asked for an additional interim remedial action between, and that's what this figure is depicting. It's showing the capture zone of FTO2 here to the southwest of the figure, and then to the eastern side of the figure, that's showing the capture of Mission Street. And so as you can see here, some of these red dots reflect the concentrations here above our GSI criteria. And some of those concentrations are actually quite high. And we've requested another interim remedial action in this area. Although delineation of nature and extent is still going on in the remedial investigation, EGLE feels that there's sufficient information right now to implement a remedial action at the source. Okay. And currently, we have not received a response from Air Force from that letter either. And we did submit a follow-on request to get responses to those letters in December of this year as well. And that's the update for the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amanda Armbruster for the Oscoda area sites. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Beth. Good evening, everybody. My name is Amanda Armbruster. I work for EGLE's Remediation Redevelopment Division, and I've been working on the Oscoda area sites for a little over 2 years now. And I want to let everyone know that we've recently hired a new project manager in our office, and her name is Lynn Gasson. She'll be managing the Oscoda area sites moving forward. Lynn has previously worked as an environmental consultant and has quite a bit of an investigation and remediation experience. And I will continue to work with her for quite a while as she transitions into this new role. And Lynn, I don't know if you want to maybe just click on your camera so people can put a face with a name. Yep, thank you, Lynn. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please, Beth. Right, so tonight I'm going to briefly talk about some of the other PFAS sites in Oscoda that EGLE is currently investigating. This figure right here, excuse me, shows where EGLE has installed groundwater monitoring wells throughout Oscoda and Osable townships. Many of these wells are sampled on a quarterly basis, and I'm going to go through some figures that have results for wells that were sampled in October of 2021. A groundwater sampling event was also conducted in January of this year, but results are still being compiled. Next slide, please. Right. This first figure shows the Kobath Road area. It's located on the northwestern end of Vanetten Lake. There were 2 wells sampled in this area in October, and 1 well was above EGLE's drinking water cleanup criteria. The PFAS in this area is believed to be associated with a historic fire that was put out with firefighting foam containing PFAS. Oscoda Township is working to expand their municipal water service to this area. Next slide, please. So this figure shows the results for 1 well that was sampled on the east side of Cedar Lake. The result from October was below our drinking water cleanup criteria for PFAS and was also below our criteria when we sampled this location in January, April, and July of 2021. Next slide, please. This figure shows results for 8 wells that were sampled around the southeastern end of Vanetten Lake, which we refer to sometimes as the Loud Drive area. 4 wells had detections of PFAS above drinking water cleanup criteria. The source of PFAS in this area is currently unknown, and expansion of municipal water service throughout this area is ongoing. Next slide, please. This figure shows results for 4 wells sampled near the Oscoda Schools complex. 3 wells were above drinking water cleanup criteria, and this contamination is believed to be associated with a historic fire in a school storage building that was fought with PFAS containing firefighting foam. The school is currently on municipal water. However, the neighborhood across the street to the north does not currently have municipal water, but that is being planned for that to be expanded to that area as well. Next slide, please. This is a figure that shows a monitoring well location in Oscoda Township near the intersection of Mill Street and Sunset Road. We'd previously had an exceedance of drinking water criteria in this location. However, in October of this year, we did not have any exceedances, and in July of 2021, we did not have any exceedances. Next slide, please. This last slide right here depicts a location, the location of monitoring wells in Oscoda Township near Smith Street and the mouth of the Oscoda River. This is a new figure that I haven't shown in the past. Some of you may have been familiar with figures that I've shared in prior town halls, but this is one that we didn't typically share on prior meetings. So this may be a little bit new to some of you, but this is the Oscoda Smith Street Area Investigation Area. We've been sampling the wells in this location on a quarterly basis as well. There were 7 monitoring wells sampled in October and 1 surface water sample. 6 of the monitoring wells were above drinking water cleanup criteria, and the source of contamination in this area is unknown. Municipal water is available throughout this area. However, we did discover a few private wells that were being used, and we've sampled those wells and they were below criteria. Additional investigation is being planned for this year. We're hoping to do more work in 2022 to help determine potentially what the source is of the contamination in this area and get a better handle on the extent of the contamination to both the south and to the west. We also have some plans to conduct some additional investigation in 2022 on the former McDonald's Country Store property. I don't have a figure that shows the location of that, but it's a property northwest of Vanetten Lake on F41. There was a fire on this property that was historically fought with PFAS containing firefighting foam, and we're planning to collect additional groundwater and soil samples on that property this year. And just to let everyone know, all the figures that I went through today, as well as other investigation reports and data for the Oscoda area sites, is available on the MPART webpage. Please feel free to reach out to Lynn or I if you have any questions or need any help finding any information regarding these sites. And that's all I have. Moving on, our next speaker will be Punit Beach, who's a toxicologist with the Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everyone. My name is Punit Beach, and I'm a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'll be talking about the health effects associated with PFAS, sharing with you the resampling efforts surrounding the Wurtsmith Air Force Base, along with the introduction to Oscoda Area PFAS exposure assessment. Next slide, please. Most of what we know about the toxicity of PFAS comes from the study of 2 specific compounds, PFOA and PFOS. Adverse health effects have been established in epi and lab animal model studies of these PFAS chemicals. This slide provides some of the adverse health effects in humans associated with higher PFAS exposure from epi studies, which includes reduced fertility, increasing the chance of high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, where preeclampsia is a pregnancy complication characterized by high blood pressure, small decrease in infant birth weight, and increasing cholesterol levels, especially total and low density lipoprotein cholesterol. Next slide, please. Increasing the chance of thyroid disease and liver damage, decrease in the immune response to vaccines, and increasing chance of cancer, especially kidney and testicular cancers. Next slide, please. So here I'll talk about MDHHS comparison values, which are the lowest of the two, screening levels and the approved MCLs. And we use this lower value to guide our public health recommendations. As a result, data above these comparison values often triggers a deeper dive into the data and risk. Here in the Oscoda area, MDHHS has taken a precautionary public health response through the distribution of filters. Although the water may be fine to drink, but this ensures residents' continued protection while the investigation continues. Next slide, please. So these are the MDHHS comparison values for some of the specific PFAS analytes. Next slide, please. The MDHHS resampling effort is to understand PFAS fluctuations in drinking water wells, and this, along with the source area characterization and extent of plume contamination, will help support our final public health determination. We finished round 1 in summer of 2020. In this round 1 of resampling, we collected samples from 277 wells. Out of those, we had 136 non-detects and 141 detections. And out of these 141 detections, there were 20 detections that exceeded MDHHS comparison values. And the bottom 2 rows, this is the range of total PFAS and P4 plus PFOS, and it does not include non-detects. Next slide, please. So we finished the second round of resampling last summer, and this slide provides the round 2 summary. In the round 2, we collected samples from 280 wells, and out of those, we had 147 non-detects and 133 detections. Out of those 133 detections, there were 19 detections that exceeded MDHHS comparison values. Next slide, please. There is going to be round 3 of residential well resampling this summer to capture seasonal homes. Next slide, please. These are the figures based on the 2 rounds of resampling. The blue dots here represents non-detections, whereas the white dots are detections, but less than the MDHHS comparison values, whereas orange dots are detections above MDHHS comparison values. After resampling rounds 1 and 2, residents who participated in these resampling rounds received result letters with specific filter recommendations according to the area of concern. As you can see here in this figure, there are different areas of concern: Osable Township, Loud Drive, Kobath Road. So everyone got specific recommendations. So please continue following those recommendations. Next slide, please. This slide explains the updates on Oscoda Area PFAS exposure assessment. In this exposure assessment, MDHHS will ask for a blood draw and a short survey about the community's exposure sources. We would include not only those who live in the Oscoda area, but also those who do not live there, but may hunt or fish in the area. And we'll find out their average PFAS blood level. Individual PFAS blood results will be mailed out. In the recent community advisory team meeting that happened on the 31st of January this year, community advisory team reviewed recruitment materials and provided us important feedback. At this point, we are in the planning and development phase and planning to start recruitment for this exposure assessment in summer of this year. Next slide, please. So these are some of the resources that you can use to know more about PFAS. Thank you. I'll give it back to you, Sue.
Thanks, Punit. All right, we'll get started with our comments, questions, and answers session. And Beth, if you would put that next slide up with the instructions on how to ask a question. Before we get to the questions, I want to go to Kathy Woosterbarth and ask if you have updates from the NOW group or from the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. Kathy?
Hi, Sue. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. All right. I do have a few actually, and I'm hoping that people will be patient with the multiple questions that I have. If I need to pose them separately, maybe later or after other people have a chance to talk to them, just cut me off and defer me.
Yeah, if you can give your updates now, and if you have questions, we'll take those during the Q&A session.
Okay, all
Okay.
right. I guess one of the biggest things that have happened in the last couple of weeks is that we're, obviously the Restoration Advisory Board is in force there for our area. And recently there's discussion between the Air Force and some veterans about the potential exposure to PFAS in the historical water supply on the base. Some veterans spoke up about that and asked about that during the RAB meeting. And during the RAB meeting, our own state epidemiologist that we expect to support the residents of Michigan agreed with the
Kathy, we're having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's much better. Yeah.
Okay, so the representative, the epidemiologist.
We're losing you again a bit.
Oh, boy. I guess maybe I can relocate myself in the house.
Okay.
But so during the meeting, the epidemiologist, and that was we were really disappointed that they agreed with the Air Force's minimization of the potential exposure for PFAS because of the lack of data that supports that. We expect the state to protect the residents and maybe consider presumptive causes and that sort of thing in terms of especially with Wurtsmith and how long we've had to deal with this. So we were really disappointed that we were not supported by the state during that RAD meeting regarding that. The other work that Punit just talked about was the establishing the exposure assessment. I have had some questions related to the participant eligibility and how that, I guess, relates to what we intend to use the results for. Because from what I understand, what Punit just said, so it's Michigan residents greater than 12 years old who currently live in Oscoda, of the Oscoda area, or Michigan resident or non-Michigan residents that are over 12 that swam, fished, boated, canoed, kayaked, and were eaten deer.
No, we're losing you, Kathy. We're losing you again.
Oh, goodness.
And see, you come right back though. I don't understand.
Okay, I'm going to try to take out. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so it must have been my speakers. All right, so I was just talking about the participant eligibility for the exposure assessment.
Mhm.
And
Is this a question you'll have for the Q&A session?
Well, I guess I'm asking if Punit maybe could expand on how that relates to the results and how they will be used.
Okay, we'll save that one for the Q&A session.
Okay, and that's it for our updates.
Okay. All right. Well, since we've got you, why don't you go ahead and ask that question, and we'll direct that to Punit.
Okay, so Punit, I was asking about how the results will be used for the exposure assessment, and I think when we were in our community advisory team, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
How the goal, I guess, goal participation in terms of numbers, and I'm really hoping that veterans will get involved because they're obviously, in my opinion, they were exposed highly to PFAS in the area and may potentially have some high results.
So in terms of using the results, so individual result letters will be mailed. Like if you will participate in the study, you will get your results. But overall, as a group, depending on how many people are going to participate, that average will be compared to the enhanced data. It's an exposure assessment as it's not a health study. So there cannot be association between your blood level and the health effects. So that's how the data will be used. In terms of eligibility, this study is specific to Oscoda residents, not specific to veterans, but anyone who is in Oscoda area, or even non-Oscoda resident, but within Michigan. And if they hunt or fish, or if they came in contact with foam after 2012, they can be a part of the study.
Yes, and I'm not sure, Sue and Punit, if we're going to have another community, I forget the cat.
Advisory team, yeah.
Yes, if we're going to have more meetings, but I really would like to see a emphasis put on promoting it with the veterans that
Okay.
still live here.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you, Kathy.
Mhm.
All right, our next question is from Arnie, and Beth, I don't know if you have any more information about the Purdue study. Arnie's asking if DNR is going to be presenting any data, and if not, if we can give a status and an expected timeline. I don't believe Tammy is on tonight.
This is Beth. Sorry. Tammy had let us know that she thinks that they'll be able to present at our next quarterly meeting of this nature. And I know that the actual Purdue study, the report is still under review. The last I checked about a week or two ago. So I can we can try to get an updated timeline on the MPART webpage. That'll take a week or two to come out, but that way everybody will know what the timeline is. And I can get back to you specifically, Arnie.
That sounds good, Beth. Thank you. Next question, I believe, is for you too. Has EGLE made any assumptions as to the reasons? Oops, sorry, I'm skipping a question, but has EGLE made any assumptions as to the reasons for the lower PFAS values around Cedar Lake? Amanda, that might be you.
Yes, I would say one of the assumptions we could make would be that there may not be a significant source of PFAS in this area, and that's why we aren't seeing consistent results above our cleanup criteria. We don't have any knowledge of historic fires being fought with firefighting foam in this area. And I know it's a pretty densely populated area with a lot of residences, so it may just be the normal household use of various products that may contain PFAS that has resulted in the historic detections we had. And we do still have some detections of PFAS in the well that we've been sampling, just not above criteria. I guess that's some of what I would offer in that regard.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. And back to Rex's first question. Just a reminder, if you're on the phone and you would like to ask a question, you can hit #2 on your phone and we'll see that your hand is raised. Okay, so next question from Rex. Has the Air Force accepted the Michigan promulgated standards for the ARARs for Ken Ratliff Park and FTO2?
Hey, this is Beth. So the ARARs that have been accepted for the discharge are the numbers that are within the substantive requirements document. Thank you. Does that answer it, Rex?
Rex,
Okay.
hand raised. Rex, do you have any more that you'd like to add?
Yeah, the SRDs and the Michigan standards are two different sets of numbers. The question is, are they the same? Because if they're not, and Air Force is trying to go above our promulgated standards, then that becomes an issue. So Beth, I was hoping you could clarify how close are we to what we want out of the Air Force?
Correct. So we have currently the SRD, and anyone from Water Resources on the phone. Matt, I think you're on if you want to jump in. Go ahead. But they're the technology standards, technology-based standards for our water quality standards. So Matt, I'll let you expound on that more if you'd like. But right now, I believe for Clark's Marsh, I believe it's 15 parts per trillion and 40 parts per trillion. Matt, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
15 on what, 40 on what, Beth, if you could get that clarified for us, please.
Say again, I'm sorry.
You got 15 PPT, but you don't tell us what compound, and the 40
Oh,
P. But you
yeah,
don't say-
it's for PFOS and PFOA only. And Matt, can you confirm that those are the values, Matt Seiler?
Yeah, this is Matt. I'm sorry, I was just looking it up in the permit. Yeah, for PFOS, it's 20 nanograms per liter, and PFOA, it's 40 nanograms per liter. And that's at the FTO2.
Okay.
And then for the central treatment system, the numbers are real similar. But yeah, these are performance-based numbers. And the SRD is actually like the permit. It's a substantive requirements document, just so you know what SRD stands for.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Now, why wouldn't we want our promulgated standards and the SRD numbers to be equivalent?
Equivalent to?
Well, it sounds like Air Force is getting a little buffer as to they can go a little higher and nobody's going to yell at them, but yet we've got promulgated standards that are much lower. So why aren't we holding them accountable to that same standard?
So my understanding, and I think this is Charlie Bauer. I'm sorry, this is Charlie Bauer from Water Resources Division. If you want to delve into a much more detailed discussion on what is more restrictive, I think you should really talk to our permits folk. But my understanding is that the SRD limits are more restrictive.
But they're higher.
So again, I think that if you want to have that kind of conversation, we can get you in touch with our permit section staff and they can explain to you the details of how those numbers were generated.
It'd be useful to have that presented to the RAB, which is also, I sit on the RAB as a community member. So yes, that would be a definite interest to the RAB at the next opportunity.
Okay.
I think we have talked about this at the RAB before.
Yeah, I think Tarek has presented at the RAB before, but certainly it's a complicated issue. It's a very technical issue. And if you wanted to have Tarek back again to talk about it again, we can do that.
Yeah. This RAB member doesn't recall that discussion because he would have identified it as a discrepancy. So yes, I think further work in this area in communicating with the RAB would be a great idea.
In the meantime, I'm going to see if I can get that information for you here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tony, I see you have your hand raised. Is it a related question?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So to clarify my understanding for Beth or Matt, as I understand it, the SRD measures the discharge of the treated water. And I think that where some of the confusion may be coming is that, for example, I'll use the Vanetten Lake IRA. We have GSI requirements for PFOS, for example, of 12 parts per trillion. That's the water that's entering Vanetten Lake from the plumes. And so I guess my question is, putting the SRD aside, if I'm correct that SRD just measures the discharge of the treated water, are we measuring what is getting, the water that's entering Vanetten Lake at Ratliff Park to see if it complies with the GSI? during the IRA?
No, I mean, right now, that's not being done.
So I think where Rex was going, and I don't want to speak for Rex, but it was where I was going when I listened to his question. We're not holding the Air Force to the state standard, at least at Vanetten Lake, the waters that are being discharged into the lake, even during this treatment system that's being set up. So the Air Force is not being held to that standard.
So they're right now, because it's an interim remedial action, the ABARs that are in place actually are the SRD or substantive requirements document values. And so Matt and Charlie, and again, it's better to have Tarek Buckmaster, our permits supervisor, to discuss this. But my understanding is those technology-based standards are based on a daily average, which are more restrictive than the GSI criteria. The GSI criteria are compliance criteria that are not currently, I know it sounds like bureaucratic stuff here, but Water Resources is better to give you the description of the SRD values. Tarek will definitely either bring him back to this meeting or bring him to, I'm not sure if we can still give presentations at the RAB, but we can just definitely discuss that with Air Force.
So, Beth, I just have one question now. Doesn't the SRD take a measurement at a different place than you would measure for the GSI?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So we would be, instead of the discharge, we would be measuring the groundwater before it entered the surface water. So it would generally be a well or something like that. There's a few ways to meet that compliance.
That's how you would measure the GSI, right?
Correct. Sorry, I misspoke. Yep. Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
What's the best way to have that conversation with Tarek? This is a question directed to Beth or Matt or Charlie. Will you be contacting him and ask him to contact Rex? How can we get this question answered?
Yeah, so I mean, I can follow up with Beth on how best to provide that information. But my understanding from hearing this discussion is that it's more than just an individual person who has a question on how those values were developed and whether or not they're as restrictive, more restrictive as other values that are being discussed right now. So I think Tarek could give the presentation. He gave it before, and I think he can do that again. And I think that would probably be helpful for people's understanding. It's a technical issue, right? And they're the ones that deal with setting those limits.
Okay. And I see that we have caller with the last four digits 2489 with a hand raised. I'm not sure if this is a related question. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah, Sue, this is Dave Wynn. I have two questions. My first question is to Punit. The map that he showed the residential wells for 2020 and 2021, that map on this slide package was very, very hard to see. Is that map available that can be either on the MPART website or can it be emailed so that we can blow it up and see exactly what's going on? Because I wasn't able, I mean, I looked at that map and I couldn't tell one from the other.
This is not available right now at the MPART website, but this presentation will be posted there. But I think the round 1 and round 2 results can also be posted there. I'll talk to Amanda related to that.
Yeah.
So
well, go ahead, Dave.
So you can I get a copy of it somehow emailed to me, or I mean, I want to be able to blow this thing up to where I can see what the heck's going on.
Let me check with the management whether it's possible to send an email to you. Otherwise, definitely it will be posted at MPART website pretty soon. but let me
Okay.
get back to you on that.
All right, now my second question, this question is for Beth. Now that the RI documentation is out on the administrative record, Beth, can you give us the top five heavy hitters on which your comments that aren't resolved?
Yeah, we're kind of currently under discussion. We just got that last week. And so again, several of the ones that we talked about before as the NOW group, those remain unresolved. I actually have a meeting with my management tomorrow to discuss our exact path forward on those and which ones. But some of the ones that we mentioned before, for instance, the east side of Vanetten Lake investigation on the east side of Vanetten Lake during the RI, that is still unresolved. That investigation currently is not in the final plan. And then along with that, understanding the hydrogeology of Vanetten Lake, that's not completely in the plan. We've asked Air Force to update the residential well survey in the area, especially with, DHHS has they're sampling the residential wells and in conjunction with DHD2 offering filters if samples are above the MDHHS comparison values or whatever the path forward is for that area. But that's something that I would like to see updated. Also, there's a guidance memo that I had shared with the RAB that talks about potentially recognizing state standards for removal actions and providing alternate water is considered a removal action in CERCLA. And so that was one where I'd really like to see Air Force update their residential well survey. And so I guess those are kind of my top two that are still left unresolved. And then we have that meeting tomorrow to discuss in a bit more detail with my management and then a specific path forward.
All right, when do you think you'll be to a point where you can let the RAB or the community or the NOW group or any of us know what the state's plan is?
Sure, so I'm hoping to get a little bit more from that meeting tomorrow. And then we can, if we don't have the plan tomorrow, if we still have to dig in a little bit more tomorrow, I can definitely give you an update tomorrow on the timeline, and I can email that out to Mark and Neil if that'd
be great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Rex, this is Matt Seiler. I just wanted to try to answer that question again that you asked. In regards to the difference between the water quality standards and the limits in the SRD, the water quality standards actually represent a monthly average, whereas the SRD represents a daily average. So it's actually more restrictive than the water quality standards. And then I think your other question was, what were the limits in the for the FDO2? PFAS was 20 nanograms per liter. PFOA was 40 nanograms per liter. And then for the central treatment system and Mission Street pump and treat system, it's 15 nanograms per liter for PFAS and 40 nanograms for PFOA. I hope that answers or helps answer your question.
All right, thank you for that. We'll go back to our questions now. And Tony, I see that you also were interested in those figures that Punit showed us. So let's get back to you on that one as well. And Punit, if you could follow up with Tony on that too.
Yes, I noted down the email ID. And depending on the answer, I can either email or either will put it on the MPART website.
Yeah, and we can let you know when that's posted on the MPART webpage.
Yes.
Too. All right, question from Connie, and this is for Amanda. And it's a long one. Trying to summarize. Yeah,
I might be able to actually, I've read through it. Might be helpful. Beth, I don't know if you still have control of the slide deck, if you brought up the slide for the Sable Township, Smith Street area. So it looks like that's what Connie's question is kind of referring to. It's probably my second to last one, or it might be my last one. I think it was. So one more back. One forward. Keep going, one more. Yep, that's it. So Connie, this is the Smith Street area. I think this is kind of what your questions were referring to. So if you look at the little bit larger blue dots on this figure, those are monitoring wells that were installed, and there were numerous samples collected to vertically profile the concentrations in the groundwater. In the RIMW 29 location on the left-hand side of that figure, we had monitoring well screens and took samples from 8 feet, 14 feet, 25 feet, and 32 feet. And then the RIMW 31, which is located right next to Lake Huron, that other larger dot, we actually took samples from 12, 26, 38, and 46 feet. And consistently in both of those locations, the shallowest portion of the aquifer is where we had the highest concentrations. So that 2.5 to 7.5 foot interval that we sampled in MW 29 was historically the highest, and why we continue to repeat that sample location. And the aquifer here is just a sandy aquifer. We encounter groundwater pretty shallow because we're pretty close to Lake Huron and the Oscoda River. In other instances where we sampled from deeper depths, I think you used an example of 12 to 17 feet is sometimes where we sampled. That's probably because there's different elevations and the groundwater is encountered a little bit deeper. Or it may be that we're sometimes sampling deeper depths that you may see depicted on our figures, because we're just trying to go back and make sure that the deeper depths aren't showing increasing concentrations over time, or because historically we've seen the highest concentrations in deeper depths. So we want to continue to repeat those same sample locations to see how concentrations fluctuate. So hopefully that helps. Feel free to unmute if you have anything additional that you are looking for answers on. Or go ahead and type additional questions in the chat if you want. We can get to those after you have a chance to write them up.
all right, thanks, Amanda.
Mhm.
A question from Greg. Is there any ongoing sampling of PFAS levels in the effluent coming out of Clark's Marsh, flowing out to the Oscoda River through 3 pipes? If these levels are above the MCLs, what are the interim remediation actions to address this?
So currently there is no ongoing sampling out of 3 pipes going into the Oscoda. I know that Air Force is performing some stormwater sampling as part of the stormwater permit for Oscoda Wurtsmith Airport Authority. And so sampling from the base, not at the very end of 3 pipes, but up further will be done as part of that effort, from my understanding. But there is no ongoing sampling being done with 3 pipes that recurs over and over. EGLE has requested that stormwater sampling is included in the remedial investigation work plan. Again, we're still making it through the comments of what was resolved and unresolved, so I don't have a good idea yet of where we are with that. Jeremiah, from our consultant, do you have any additional thing to add on that?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
All right, another question from Connie. The Air Force installed deep groundwater wells near Vanetten Lake to prevent PFAS compounds from entering the lake. What remedial action will the Air Force take to remediate the PFAS concentrations within Vanetten Lake? Beth, I think you've touched on this. Do you want to answer that?
Right, so Connie, if you're talking about the extraction wells for the interim remedial action, I believe Air Force was out at the site and determining exactly where the screen lengths would go based on it, doing some investigation. Essentially, while they're drilling the wells, they're looking at the geology first in order to determine the exact screen length that they would want to install, the length of screen for those extraction wells for the Vanetten Lake IRA. And aside from that, I don't have the final depths yet on what those are. I think we could probably, Jeremiah, do you know if there's a ballpark on that from the remedial action work plan?
No, I mean, the base of clay is about 70 feet, between 65 and 70 feet. So they'll probably be that deep.
Yeah, we anticipated that they would be screening the majority of the aquifer.
All right, thanks.
And then,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I think she had a second part to the question. What remedial action will Air Force take to remediate the PFAS concentrations within Vanetten Lake? So we're not there yet. The surface water sampling still has not been completed as part of the remedial investigation. And so that would be surface water samples of Vanetten Lake for that RI. And then as far as we know, unless they were sufficient to cause interim remedial action or removal action in some way, which I'm not really sure what that would look like. Currently, other than for remediating the surface water, that would have to go through the feasibility study to look at different alternatives. And then it would also go on to a final remedy dependent upon the results of that surface water sampling.
All right, thanks, Beth. Rex, I don't know if your hand is still raised from your last question or if you have a new question related to this topic. And Beth, I think we lost our, there we go.
Yeah, it took a minute to get this thing to respond to an unmute request. I just wanted to point out that from this engineer's standpoint, SRDs are higher than MCLs, and that's anti-intuitive as to where we need to be on this whole project. And so I hope we can get that reconciled so that we can better understand why the SRDs are higher than our own hard fought for MCL limits, because it sure looks to this engineer that the Air Force is getting a pass on that. And I hope you guys can educate us so that we can understand why the numbers are where they are. So other than that, I'll drop off and keep listening.
Okay, thanks, Rex. And Tony, did you have a related question?
Yes, with regard to the screening at Vanetten Lake, the captured wells, Beth, in the early phases of this, the Need Our Water Group had requested that the Air Force expand that the length of that capture field by about 1,500 feet to the north. Can you tell us, have they agreed to do that, or have they agreed to take any other measures to capture that additional approximately 1,500 feet that we identified?
So I remember prior to, it's so hard to remember now for me at what stage what came in, but I think initially, I think it was either 10 and now we have 11, or it was 11 and now we have 12 wells. And Jeremiah can jump in here and correct me as to the number of wells. Do you remember, Jeremiah, how many there are now for the Vanetten Lake IRA?
I don't recall, no.
Okay. So anyway, we have an additional well added, but at the same time, I don't think it's quite as far to the north as what as what we had hoped it would be, but it is still a bit farther to the north, if that helps.
Yeah, Beth, that does. Thank you. And but one other follow up on that is I'd heard the Air Force talking about attacking that area in question in some other fashion. Did that ever come up in discussions, or is that not on the table at this point?
So some of the requests that we had the request to investigate that area during the IRA and some of our comments, and that didn't happen, but Air Force decided to that they wanted to prioritize that area during the remedial investigation. When I'm actually looking at the results, we still haven't had those discussions with Air Force yet as to what the next steps will be. But my understanding was that, if the results from the area warranted it, that could be another potential area for an IRA, but obviously they didn't commit to that. It was just something that kind of folks were thinking as they were planning, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Thanks.
And then I'm not sure if you're talking about too, I know that at one point, and EGLE wasn't really involved in this, but Air Force collected some seep samples, and it was, I believe it was the kind of the midsummer RAB that we had in conjunction with that. Air Force collected seep samples up near DRMO and LF 3031 and the northern portion of Vanetten Lake. And I believe they were hoping to get some like a CERTA project or technology, a burgeoning technology. I can't think of the correct, innovative technology is what I'm looking for. I think they were hoping to get that in that location, but the seep samples that they collected were not that high in PFAS. And so EGLE has kind of questioned, were they really sampling groundwater in that area and things like that? We just don't have that information yet. But I know that was something that Air Force was looking at, but based on the results, I don't believe they were able to get that.
Thanks, Beth. Tony, let's keep going with your couple of your questions here. This is for Punit. Will the exposure assessment report averages based on categories, for example, full-time Oscoda residents, part-time residents, visitors by frequency of visits?
So to answer this, we'll report averages based on the total study population. We'll compare it with the enhanced data, but it really depends on the participation in case of full-time and part-time Oscoda residents.
Okay, and then another question from Tony, also for you. In the residential well sampling program, why are results limited to PFOA and PFOS rather than the other PFAS chemicals for which there are MCLs?
If you're talking about these figures that I presented today, these are not limited to PFOA and PFOS. All the PFAS analytes where we have MCLs, those were included. So any of the residential wells where there was a detection or detection higher than the CV, those were marked in those colors. So all of the PFAS analytes where we have MCLs were considered.
All right, and let's keep going with a question from Kathy. Is the state and the health department giving a copy of any and all notices provided to residents, for example, additional testing of private wells, to the county or township officials? Punit, I believe that's for you. I know we do meet with the local officials and provide them updates as well.
We provide updates, but we provide results to EGLE and local health department.
Yeah, and I'll just offer that I have shared some of the residential well data with the township in the past too, for the benefit of them in their planning of the expansion of their municipal water system. So that helps inform them as to where residences are on private wells and whose wells are exceeding. So, historically, Mike Jury shared some of that information with with the townships. And then I don't believe I've shared anything with the township with regard to 2021, but I think they received results from the 2020 sampling.
All right. And next question from Kathy. How can residents request a resampling of their well if they were not identified for the recent well testing or retesting?
So if any resident is looking for this information, they can contact me, and then I can reach out to EGLE and see if that well is in the area of concern, and then we can act accordingly. If it will be in the area of concern, yes, we can resample.
All right. Next question from Kathy. Considering the continuous discovery of PFAS in unexpected areas in the Oscoda and Osabo communities, will the state consider providing filters to any homeowner with a private well?
Okay, that really depends if that kind of a public health action is needed. We are providing point of use filters with any detection in most of the areas like Osabo Township, Kobath, Loud Drive. So even if there is like 1 part per trillion detection, yes, we are providing filters there, but it really depends on the area and the information that we have.
Okay, our next question is from Arnie, and this is for Beth. Regarding the Purdue study, how will RRD ensure that the findings, recommendations, or species screening risk criteria are timely and appropriately submitted to Air Force and incorporated into their RI work plan ASAP for timely ecological risk sampling in the final RI report? And I'll let you respond to that before we ask Arnie's second question.
Sure, Arnie. So we do plan to share those results. I've already checked in with Tammy, and so when we can, when that report's in a final condition, is the last I heard, we plan to share those results with Air Force. As far as the public, I would rather check it back in with Tammy on what the DNR plan is for that. But I do understand that the public would like to see that. I just don't want to speak for DNR on that. Sorry, Sue, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Arnie's second question was, will the findings be shared with the public at the same time they're given to the Air Force? And that's what you're responding to.
Yep. And so the RI work plan has already been finalized as far as Air Force is concerned. And so it looks like there's any follow-up on that, it'll be via correspondence. And we'll just have to see where that goes. The other reports that I probably should have mentioned in my update tonight were there's also for the RI a risk assessment as part of the PFAS RI, but that was separated out into a separate work plan. And so EGLE provided our back check to that work plan. So EGLE, gave comments on the draft final plan. Then Air Force responded to our comments. And then we're seeing if those responses are resolved or unresolved. And so we responded back to them on, it was either the 28th or the 1st, so earlier this week, on that risk assessment back check. And so a few comments still remained unresolved, but I would say that overall, we seem to be making headway on that risk assessment. The other plan that is out there is the biota sampling plan, and that's called a UFP QAP, so Uniform Federal Policy Quality Assurance Project Plan addendum. And so that's an addendum to the RI QAP. And that includes the biota sampling to support that risk assessment. And so we just provided comments. I believe we've had it about a month or less than a month, but we just provided comments on that earlier this week as well. Thank you.
Arnie, I noticed you had your hand raised. Is it a related question?
Yes, it is definitely related. in comparison to some other Air Force sites, they've been sharing their risk assessment and other RI work plan information more quickly and earlier than here. And it puts you in a very tough position, but somehow we need to push them to share this publicly, because I have not seen, and I don't know if you've shared with the Now Group, any of your comments that give us some indication of how close and how comprehensive the Air Force is treating our site for this risk assessment. And I know that at other sites, P's exactly is they've shared and done a briefing to the public in their last RAB meeting just in the last 3 to 10 days. And they're doing fish sampling, they're doing biota sampling, and they're sharing those numbers or plans with the public. So if there's this back check thing is not working for us, I don't think, and the public. So I'd like you to somehow clarify how that's going to work for us here with this Air Force team.
Sure, and I mean, there's, only so much I can say. All the plans that we receive, we're still receiving over box.com. So that's a software where I don't even have the ability to search the document, and I cannot download it. So it adds to the difficulty in our reviews. I know that, but that does allow us to review it. And so that's at, Air Force has instituted this, so we're still able to view it because we have a difference over our FOIA laws. Now, the other item as far as our comments. Now, our comments in the past, we have not been able to share those. And, I'd like to check in again with my management team on where we are with that again. But the last time I did check in that we are not able to share our comments because they're still a part of the negotiation on those documents. And that's just where we are on that. And then as far as the biota sampling plan, we just provided comments on those, and that plan hasn't been with us very long. I'd say, I don't remember the day we got it, but I want to say it's been with us only a month, somewhere in that neighborhood. And, it did look like there was fish and some biota sampling, included in that plan. But you're right that we are getting separate documents for these. We're not always getting them together. And I think it's just that, I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it's that folks are just trying to move quickly here or what, but it does have its challenges, but it is still moving. And so Dave Klein or John Bradley, I don't know if you want to add more here. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh,
sure.
Thanks, Dave.
This is David Klein. I'm the manager of the Superfund section here at EGLE. And yeah, so our comments, when the document's final, my understanding is our comments are being attached to the document. So like the RI work plan, you should be able to see what our comments are and how the Air Force addressed them. So once the document's finalized, they should become available to you. But until they are, the Air Force has asked us not to share anything until the document's finalized.
Yeah, that's correct, Dave. And yes, I should add, Arnie, in case that wasn't clear, that last appendix of the RI work plan that came out on the administrative record does contain the majority of our comments. We had a few supplemental email comments that were not included. But thank you, Dave.
All right, our next question is from Connie. does the municipal water supply use groundwater or Lake Huron for its intake? And does the municipality sample its incoming water for PFAS?
So I'm not sure who the best person here is to take this question. I'm not sure if Mike Jury is on, but the municipality does.
Yeah, I'm on, Beth.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, HUSHRA, or the Huron Shores Regional Utility Authority, does draw their water from Lake Huron. And they do analysis for PFAS in their water. We, the state, have been sampling their Lake Huron intake water for PFAS also. If you'd like to see those results, you can find those online on our website, on the MPART website. You can go to the testing part and you will be able to find all those results. So Connie, yes, they do. Their intake is Lake Huron, and they do their sampling on their end, what goes out to the population, and we, the state, have been testing their Lake Huron intake. So I hope that answers your question.
Sorry, I was muted. That was our last question. We'll give it one last call here for any questions you want to type into the Q&A, or if you want to raise a hand. Okay, not seeing anything else.
Beth, Arnie's got his hand up again.
Arnie, go ahead.
At the last monthly Wurtsmith RAB MPART call that Beth manages, someone said, I think it was Punit, but it might have been the district, said that there was going to be fish sampling done by them this spring or summer. So that's the first part of my question is, do you have specifics of where, when, what species, that kind of thing? And secondly, did the Air Force include any fish sampling and deer sampling in their risk assessment plan as seen so far by you?
I will say that I'm sure that fish sampling is in there. I would have to look back to see if deer sampling is in there or if there's another species as a substitute. That's something I don't know off the top of my head, so I can get back to you on that. Unless anyone else on the call knows, feel free to speak up. And then Brandon Armstrong from our Water Resources Division. I'm not sure if he was able to make the call tonight, but I can't remember if Charlie, it was you that updated, or Matt, on the fish sampling on that last call. Oh, Brandon, you're here. Thank you.
We're here. Yes, we're going to fish out of the Oscoda River again downstream from the mouth of the Foot Dam. As far as species that we're going to be looking at, we want to increase the sample size of those blue pumpkin seed because we do see variable concentrations of PFAS. And we are doing a Lake Huron food web study for contaminants of mutual concern that includes PFAS. So we'll be looking at the piscivorous wildlife food web. So we're going to be getting forage fish out of Lake Huron near the Oscoda River mouth, as well as looking at some sport fish, some predator species that may be consumed by eagles.
You're muted, Sue.
Yeah, sorry. Arnie, are we all set with your question?
Beth, when do you think you'll be able to give me an answer on the Air Force risk, including fish and deer sampling?
I think fairly soon. I hate to put Brandon on the spot for this one, but I know he was one of our reviewers on some of these. Brandon, do you remember if deer was included? I know fish was included in their biota sampling plan.
I don't recall them sampling deer. I think they were going to look at the data that we have, but I can't
Okay.
speak if they're going to be getting deer samples themselves.
Yeah, I can look through that fairly quickly this week and get back to you, Ernie.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Beth, I'm going to try to share my screen so we can show the MPART webpage.
Hey, do I stop share or just let you take over?
I believe I can just grab it here. Okay, since we did have that, we had a question about sampling municipal water. You're all pretty familiar with the MPART webpage. I don't know if you're familiar with this fairly new information system available now on the MPART webpage. It's an interactive system and provides a good amount of data here. So it has some instructions over here. So let me clear that. And I'm going to go through this really quickly. I just want you to be aware of it. It has a map that you can move around, and it will show you within your view how many MPART websites there are. I think we're at 200 or just over total. You can see within this view how many surface water samples were collected and how many statewide
Sue?
water supplies. Yeah.
Sue, just to let you know, we can't see the interactive map. You got to reshare the map because it opens it up in a separate window.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Is it viewable now?
Yeah, we can see now.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So yeah, here's the map. You can move it around. It will show you within the view that you're in how many PFAS sites there are, how many surface water samples have been collected, and the number of statewide drinking water supplies that have been sampled. And here there are some filters you can turn on and off. Oops, sorry. So you could look at just the number of PFAS sites by turning off surface water sampling and the statewide testing initiative. This would show you just PFAS sites. And then again, you could look at surface water samples, and then you could hover over these and it will give you more information. That's just a really quick view of this GIS system that's been developed. But I did want to share that with you so that you're aware of it. And that is available on the MPART website by clicking this button. You know, I see we've got, excuse me. Do we have more questions in the Q&A, Jim?
Yeah, there's a couple more questions in there.
Okay. Beth, do you want to share your screen again? I'll exit out of mine.
Okay, sure. Can you see it yet?
Not yet, but I'll go ahead and ask the questions while you're working on that. There is a question from Connie. Are fish upstream in the El Sabo River being sampled for PFOS?
We don't have any plans at this time to sample more fish in the upstream section of the El Sabo. And back in 2017, we had collected brook trout from downstream of Mayo. PFOS concentrations were low in those fish, less than 1.2 parts per billion. And then we had also collected brown trout from the river downstream of Grayling in 2017. And concentrations were similar, less than 1.1 part per billion. So we don't have any plans to get additional fish out of there this year. We are doing a surface water study across the entire Oscoda River watershed. So depending on, surface water concentrations that we find, that may warrant additional fish collections later on.
And then Brandon, can you talk a little bit about Foot Dam? So our advisory extends up to Foot Dam, and the reason behind that, fish aren't really moving beyond Foot Dam.
Yeah, so we tried to break up our fish sampling based off of fish movement. So anytime that there's an impact or a barrier to fish movement moving upstream, we try to sample those fish. So that advisory stretch for this area would be anything downstream of the Foot Dam to the mouth.
Okay, thanks for that. Arnie's asking that we share the attendee list of all who joined tonight's call, and Arnie, we don't share information on who has joined our public meetings. We wouldn't have permission to share that information, and we wouldn't do that without permission from people to share their names and email addresses. All right, next slide, please, Beth. I think that wraps us up. I don't believe we have any other questions. Take a last look. All right. Don't see any other questions, so we'll wrap this meeting up for tonight. We will get back with you with our next quarterly meeting. We thank you all for joining. Really appreciate all your time and effort involved at this site, and also your attendance tonight. Hope you're all doing well, and please continue to do so. Thank you much. Good evening.